How's it going, everyone? And welcome to Animal Talk Podcast with me, your host, Ryne Ferguson. Well, we are officially in our lockdown level 1, getting closer to the end, and it's really, really exciting. But also with that comes the new changing into summer. We're now jumping out of spring, jumping into summer. Temperatures are getting hotter, and looking very much forward to all of that. And the rainy season is upon us, and just as I speak to you, there's drips happening outside after a bit of rain that we just had, and the fresh smell of the earth, and it's really, really awesome. So really excited to introduce you to my next guest. And this person, well, had such a great time with him, and he's become a really, really good friend of mine. So everybody, this is Chad Crittle. How's it going, Chad? Thanks so much for being on the show.
It's going very well, Ryne. How are you? Thanks so much for having me.
I'm good. It's so nice to hear you. So nice to have you on the show, and super excited about this. And I know that we can chat forever, so going to be quite interesting trying to keep it to the limit, but we're going to do this.
I will do my best to keep focused in my answers and not gas bag on as we do.
Yep, that's kind of what we do for a living. So hey, what can we say?
This is true.
Alrighty, so first question I ask all of the people that are on my podcast, and everybody goes, ugh, and that is, what is your favorite animal?
Look, it's a very good question. It is currently shared with two animals, and so I'm going to take the liberty to not do an awkward pause, and I'm just going to name both of them. One would be palm cockatoos, because I'm just in love with them. They're such a spectacular bird. They break all the rules of the cockatoo world, and I'm very fortunate to be able to work with them. One of only 2 places in Australia that you can work with palm cockatoos in human care, so very lucky. And also our Aldabra giant tortoise. I have fallen head over heels in love with them as a species since I started working with them in my current role. They would have to be up there with in my favorite animal position as well. They're an incredible animal.
Nice, I like those. Of course, palm cockatoo being a cockatoo species, as an Aussie, you have to make that decision. Let's just be honest.
Oh, exactly. And it's not the most it's certainly not the most common cockatoo that we have in Australia. So even some Australians haven't even heard of a palm cockatoo. So it's a cockatoo that's got so many different unique aspects to its life cycle and its behaviour and its anatomy. And so I just love them.
So cool. Of course, when I visited Australia, I will say that cockatoos are definitely a major part of the wildlife that you see pretty much everywhere. In fact, I think you hear them more than you see them. So yeah, got a chance to also work with some palm cockatoos, not directly, but worked at a facility that had palm cockatoos, which is very rare out here. And I really do think they're very cool. They have the weirdest looking beaks out of the entire bunch of cockatoos, but hey, it works for them, so all good.
Exactly. And what's even weirder, if you ever get the chance to, have a look at a palm cockatoo's tongue. It looks like an alien. It's the only way I can describe it. It's a different shape to all other cockatoos. It looks like it has a mind of its own, and it looks like its own living being. It's worth a look.
Wow,
if you ever
okay.
get the chance.
I've noted that. I'm gonna definitely get an opportunity to do that.
Exactly. Hot tip of this podcast. Look at a
Right?
palm cockatoo. There you
Yeah.
go.
Look at a palm cockatoo's tongue and let us know what it looks like. Fantastic. Okay, so Chad, so you are in Australia, as we sort of said already, but where about currently in Australia?
I currently live in Adelaide, which is in South Australia, and I work for the Adelaide Zoo, which is part of the Zoological Society of South Australia. We have two properties, one of which is actually the largest zoo property in the world. It's called Monarto Safari Park, and that's about 40 minutes outside of the city. But I work at Adelaide Zoo, which is one of Australia's smallest in land size inner city zoos. But it's also the second oldest zoo in Australia. So it's filled with some amazing history. And I've been here now for 5 years. So I love it in South Oz.
Yeah, that's so cool. I didn't get a chance to go and see down that way, but I've heard lots of good things, and it's really cool. You know, moving around, you've had an opportunity to move quite a bit around Australia in the work that you've done. How did you actually get into working with animals?
Yeah, I have been very fortunate to have moved around as much as I have and have worked with the people that I've been able to work with. For me, my animal journey started, I think, for most animal nerds when we kids, and it was regular trips to the zoo with my family, and that was Taronga Zoo in Sydney, which I grew up in Sydney, and so it was trips to the zoo, and I always loved the different animals. Certainly, one spot that was always a visit was the seal show, which happened and had been happening at Taronga Zoo since the 1970s. And so, yeah, for me as a child, that was always a must do at the zoo. So we'd go and watch that. But then in 1997, they opened a free flight show. And this was sort of a very new thing for people in Sydney. There was only two other free flight shows in Australia at the time. And so I remember I was 7 years old and we went and watched the show, and uh, this macaw like appears out of nowhere, flying through the trees, and came down and landed on this presenter's hand at the end of the show. And I was blown away by it. It was the most unbelievable thing I'd ever seen. And from that point, I would make my family at home watch repeated bird shows starring myself and an array of budgerigars and cockatiels that became my pets at home. And so, there were several different versions of Chad's bird show. But it wasn't necessarily. I was a performing arts kid, so I loved doing theatre. I loved
Right.
doing singing and dancing, and I did a few professional shows as a child, and so that was sort of looking like my career trajectory. But it also meant I wasn't afraid of getting up in front of a group of people.
Right.
And so on a break in shows, I actually started volunteering at Taronga Zoo in a youth volunteer program that had started. And it was mainly to kind of keep my presentation skills active by being a part of education programs. And during that time, sort of caught the bug again for working directly with animals. And then one step led to another, and I finished school and got a job at the bird show, and it's just kind of gone from there. So yeah, it kind of speaks, and it's why I'm very passionate about what we do when we train animals and do public presentations, because I know that I probably wouldn't be where I am career-wise at the moment if I hadn't have seen a moment like that in a bird show. Like it really hooked me in and has set me up on the career path for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
What's really wonderful actually is one of the people who I saw doing that part in that bird show, I ended up working with when I was at that bird show, and I'm still very good friends with. So there's an amazing sort of symmetry to that. But yeah, it just kind of went from there.
Wow. I will remember, very clearly, when I started sort of in the bird show industry, I was looking around on the internet and trying to find something or some information about anything to do with bird shows. And obviously looking up all those bird shows and trying to find things and watching YouTube videos. And I remember coming across the infamous IAATE, International Association of Avian Trainers and Educators. And through that, I found NEI. And through that, I found photographs. And I will remember very clearly that there's a photograph that popped up. And I think it was because you if I remember correctly, the conference that you and I went to, it was my first conference. We were roommates then, and the first conference, it was one of the anniversaries, and we had all written something in, or had our photos put into the little magazine that they had. And I remember before that, all the stuff went out on social media and on the internet. And I remember looking and going, who is that guy? Because he's holding such cool birds and all of that type of stuff. And then I got to meet you at the conference, and we had an amazing time at the conference, as you always do at the conferences. And that was our first meeting. And it was one of the turning points for me because I could see passion. We had so much to chat about. It was really, really cool.
I remember that time fondly. I mean, we were both much younger then as well.
Yeah. Shh,
That's
don't tell
coming
anybody.
up. Yeah, exactly. That's coming up to, that would be 8, 9 years ago now, Ryan, which is kind of terrifying.
Thanks, Chad.
Yeah, that's the reality. It's the reality of aging. And like you and I talk about it, and all the people we've managed to work with in the industry would be sitting there going, "Shush, you two, you're still young."
Right.
But we, yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think I'd put an article. Very, it was pretty confident of me. I think at the time, probably too confident. But I wrote an article about the importance of involving young people in bird shows and in the bird show teams. Looking back on it now, I probably should have thought about the pictures because it ended up just looking like a resume for Chad Crittle, because I wrote this article and I was really proud of the article, but essentially every photo was just me holding a bird, and I and so, you know, older, more travelled and worked Chad would probably have done a different selection of pictures. But yeah, following on from that, I decided I'd throw my hat in the ring to present in Minnesota, and I think it was the 20th anniversary, if I recall correctly.
Right. Yep.
In Minnesota, and they hosted it in Minnesota for the first time when they did the conference too. And so I remember us connecting. I think it was over Facebook, and you suggesting we bunk together, and it was just really cool to have another person around the same sort of age,
Right.
also traveling from the other side of the world, to experience that, the chaos that a conference is, combined with the education that comes from it, and just the amazing camaraderie that our industry has. So it was a wonderful time.
Yeah, absolutely. The rushing to the different talks to try and be there on time after being awake most of the night.
Yeah, exactly. And I distinctly remember several very high-profile trainers who won't be named wearing sumo wrestling suits and with each other. But it's all part of the education.
Yep, absolutely. Wonderful icebreakers they've always been. Love it. Yeah, your article really caught me. And you may think that it was your punt at yourself, but that was actually the cool thing about it. Was I was like, hey, this guy is passionate like I am, and he's now being able to put this across in one of these really amazing bird training magazines. And he's young, he's the same sort of age as me, and I'm like, that's what drew me to it. And I was like, we gotta connect somehow so that we can chat about things and experiences. So yeah, don't worry about that. That was probably one of the best articles I had read in the beginning. So you're all good.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, we got through the conference, and that was cool. But did you go to NEI before the conference or after that?
I'd been before.
Right.
So my journey with NEI started. So when I was 18, 19, and I started doing casual work at the Taronga Zoo free flight, that was my first sort of introduction to natural encounters, because NEI had actually set that show up. So that was a project that Steve Martin had worked on, set the show up.
Right.
And the person who was supervising the show then, who still is now, had been there when Steve had set the show up. And so I started hearing these stories, and I remember we had we had the dollar routine, which in Australia, because we don't have dollar bills, is a dollar coin. So we had a galah that would, or a rose-breasted cockatoo, for those of you who know it as that would do that routine. And we had the rats running along behind the owl. And so I started going, oh, these routines are amazing. And then my supervisor at the time put me onto NEI. And then I started hearing these stories of this amazing Dallas show. Everyone, and pretty well everyone at Taronga at the time had done at least 1 year in Dallas. And so I was like, oh, maybe I should look into doing this. Got that all set up. So I reached out to NEI. I was lucky enough to get the go ahead to go over for Dallas. I was going to turn 20 while I was there, and I got a job in North Queensland. So when you're a casual keeper, and anyone who's in the animal industry knows, the thing you really want is a permanent job, because they're so few and far between. And
Right.
I was lucky enough to get a permanent job at a bird show in far north Queensland, which was a bit of a move from Sydney.
Mm-hmm.
But I moved up to Cairns. Imagine, the tropical Daintree rainforest, the Great Barrier Reef. It's a picturesque place. And so
Right.
I packed my bags and I moved to Cairns. But I was lucky enough that the facility I went to work for agreed to still let me go to Dallas. So I got on a plane, I moved to Queensland, and then 3 months after I arrived, I got on a plane and went to Dallas for 3 months. And so I was very fortunate. But that was my first experience with NEI, working with those trainers, and boy, what a pressure cooker of learning and stress and
Right.
fun. And I just wouldn't be the trainer I am today if I hadn't have gone to that show for those months. It was just incredible.
Yeah, I've heard so much about the Dallas shows, and I never got the opportunity to, because just after, really getting into IAAT and working with NEI and getting to know people, they had started wrapping up the Dallas shows for a short amount of time. As we now know, they're back up and running. But
Yes.
yeah, I didn't get that opportunity to go and experience that, but I have heard the most amazing stories. And it has, pretty much every single NEI staff member that has done it has chatted to me about it, some stories and all of that about those shows, and how hectic it can be, but how amazing it really can be. And I've watched many of them, and the shows, you can see how much effort is put in, and it's just really great. So I can only imagine you being there from a completely different part of the world, experiencing that whole, first of all, the Dallas State Fair, which is a whole experience all on its own. And
Yes.
then, the whole show and setting up the show and getting birds going and on their routines and training. And yeah, I can only just imagine how amazing that must have been.
I think that's the thing that makes that experience so incredible. Like, to put it in perspective, for those of you listening, I was in the first truck cohort of people to arrive for that year's Dallas, and it was three of us. It was Wouter Stellard, who's an incredible trainer, who's now at Columbus Zoo. Marco, who now works for San Diego, but he was working for NEI at the time. And we rocked up with 2 trucks of equipment. And it's, by equipment, I mean fridges and Avery side panels and everything you could possibly imagine takes place. This enormous leviathan of the show takes place in a classic old American band shell, those beautiful amphitheaters, which I just love. Like as a music nerd, I saw
Right.
the venue and I'm like, oh, I'm going to love this show.
Yeah.
But there's nothing there. And all of us, and you have to actually build the infrastructure to accommodate caring for 80 plus birds,
Right.
but then also train those birds, prepare them in the space of 3 weeks. So
Right.
you're building tents, you're building a kitchen bench, you're cutting perching, and then you're running and doing a rep with a group of macaws. And it was almost because at that point I hadn't worked with macaws because they're not super common in Australia,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a flock of 10 macaws in each show. And so you almost didn't have a chance to absorb that in because you were just on the go. And we were working, 12 to 14-hour days every day. And we had the option for days off, but I think I maybe took 2 of them in the 3-month period
Yep.
because what's the point? Like I was there to learn
Right.
and absorb knowledge. And at the time, I was still kind of getting into the training world. I turned 20. I was so young while I was there. And Dr. Susan Friedman came down, spent a weekend with us. And that was my first introduction to Dr. Susan Friedman. I didn't even really realize how lucky I was. A gentleman who'd spent his entire working career with training crocodilians came across and spent a weekend with us. So it was just this insane whirlwind of fun. And meanwhile, you're releasing hawks out of Ferris wheels and eating fried food every day for lunch. And like when the 20-year-old bloke from Australia is desperate to try and find a salad for lunch, you know there's too much fried food. And I got to halfway through and I'm like, I just need a salad. And so I found the one place at the Texas State Fair that did a salad. And of course it was covered in croutons and feta, but it had green in it. So I was like, yes, I'm going to eat
Yes.
this.
I found
Yeah,
it
it was
finally.
exactly. It was like it was the holy grail, let alone, the deep fried Pop Tarts. You would have thought it was that, but no, it was the Greek salad that saved me. But yeah, it was an incredible experience.
Yeah, wow. It must have been like, sticking with the American food, those type of fairs and all of that, the food is just crazy. Like the things that you wouldn't
Oh,
even imagine or think of, that's what's there.
deep fried pepperoni pizza, I remember, was the
My
one that
word.
blew my mind. And then they did the winner because they had a competition every year for the best deep fried food. And the winner of the year I was there was deep fried beer. So they had like a ravioli pouch and would put the beer in it and then flash fry it, and that won. And I was just like, wow, this is another world. This is great.
Completely. Oh, wow. It's so crazy because when I was in Minnesota, I remember we were done with the conference and leaving. Was at the airport with a few other conference attendees, and we decided we'll have a coffee and have a snack at some restaurant. And of course, they're like, "Oh, you've got to experience this. It's deep fried pickle." And I'm like,
Oh,
what? Deep fried what? And it's a deep fried pickle. And it's like these cut pickles like into like sort of round slithers and they deep fried. And I thought, no, there's no way why would I want to eat a deep fried pickle? But let me tell you, take a deep fried pickle and dip it in ranch sauce, you're good to go.
oh, yum.
Yeah.
I'm sold.
Crazy. Oh wow. And the training on the training side, now that we've been chatting about food, on the training side, it must have been quite an experience trying to desensitize birds. I mean, a lot of, NEI's birds are going to the state fair because they've been going there for the past how many years. But you're still having to desensitize them to maybe new things in the environment that weren't there in the previous fair. And you've got to do it as quickly as you possibly can because you're kind of setting up everything and you've traveled, I don't know how many hours from Florida all the way to Texas overnight and all those trips. But yeah, it must have been quite a challenge.
Yeah, it was great for me to sit back and watch people who really know their craft, who know their science and know their training, to sit back and watch them work in that environment. Because you are correct, there are some birds who at that point had been to the fair every year for 10 years, and so Bonnie and Clyde, for example, who were a pair of marabou storks. They'd been every year, and so they had their first proper session the day before we opened shows because they knew their routine. They'd come out, and it was like they'd been there every day for the last year, which is a testament to the trainers at NEI. They really know their stuff. But in that year we had several young hornbills who had just finished being hand reared, and so this was their first experience, their first free flight experience. We had a young Andean condor that it was her first free flight experience, and then there was I remember a very young crowned crane that had come from a summer show that had been happening over at San Diego Zoo, that was still very green and fresh to it. So seeing these birds basically learn how to free fly in such an amazing environment was, yeah, incredible experience. And I'm very fortunate for it because at the time I was working in Cairns, and I was very lucky. I was at the age that I was to be leader of bird training at this show. So
Wow,
essentially I had the keys to a bird show, and it was like, do what you want.
that's amazing.
And so it was a great place to get ideas, get experience, but also get a bunch of mentors that I could pick up the phone, get on the Facebook chat, and if I was
Right.
having a problem,
Yeah.
reach out and go, here's what I'm experiencing. Here's what I need help with.
Right.
And even just the mentorship from Steve Martin, I can't thank that man enough for his support and knowledge in my career. And I distinctly remember getting an email from him not long after Texas with basically because he knew I was going back into this supervisory position and I was eager to learn how to do it well. And he gave me his top 10 supervisory tips and how to be a good manager, just straight off the bat,
How
and
cool is that?
just so generous with that knowledge. And it was like, oh, I was very, very fortunate.
Yeah, that's so cool. I had the amazing opportunity to have Steve watch one of my shows, which was amazing but extremely stressful.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I tell you, I have learned so much from just watching Steve's shows, listening to him at conferences, listening to him at networking, you know, sort of workshops, going to NEI workshops. I'm with you on that. I have so much respect for him and so much that I wish I could just like, wow, you've made my career where I am today. And I think you feel exactly the same. It's just, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing now if it wasn't for those experiences, which is really awesome.
Exactly. And I had a very, I detoured from birds for a few years, much as it pains me to say it sometimes in front of other bird nerds. I detoured and I went into pinniped shows for a few years. And it was actually, it was the one thing I remember, like I was saying as a kid, going and seeing this seal show at Taronga. And so to actually get to present that too, I was very fortunate. And that was a whole other world of training and learning. But I remember Steve was in Australia and he came in and watched a show and filmed it. And it was, yeah, it was a moment of excitement slash sheer terror.
Right.
And I guess it's sort of it's like anyone who's mentored you in your career and you then show your work, which to you and I is the presentation of a good show with good animal behavior and,
Yeah.
a good message and all of that. And it's sort of akin to, your parents coming and watching your high school graduation or performance, or
Right.
whenever a mentor, someone who you look up to as a trainer, comes and watch you work. Um, but it's, terrifying slash exciting. And so, yeah, during that SEAL show, I think I was the most nervous I'd ever been. Except for when the other time was Ginger Spice from the Spice Girls was in the audience one day, and so that created a few nerves. And also, I was fortunate enough to one day we presented a show and we weren't told who it was, and the doors opened. It was a private SEAL show, and in walked Brad and Angelina
Oh, wow.
and their children to celebrate their oldest child's 10th birthday, and they had a private SEAL show. And then I had to kind of regain my focus and go and present the SEAL show. But I think, no, presenting for Steve and Susan Friedman was probably more nerve-wracking than those two.
Yeah, because they kind of know what they're looking for. Whereas
Exactly.
the other celebrities are kind of like, oh, it's just really cool. This is a great show. But
Yeah,
when you've got
exactly.
Steve or Susan, you're like, they're going to see all the oopsies and all my, did that behavior go okay? Did the animal do okay?
Yeah.
I can just remember thinking back to Steve sitting in that audience, and I must have fumbled over words a few times, but I regained myself and carried on going. And I remember after the show, him coming down and saying it was a really good one. So I was like, thank goodness.
Yeah. And I think the reason it's nerve-wracking is because they'll tell you things to work on, but that's what makes them good mentors.
Correct.
And I think of that in my daily life. I'm in a supervisory position now, and my job is to be supportive, but in a way that gives people to work on stuff.
Right.
And in the same way, when Steve actually came to the zoo I'm currently at only a year and a half, 2 years ago, to watch some sessions, and you're again not desperate for, but excited for the approval, but also more excited for the things that I can do better.
Right.
Because as you get older, and I think you realize that the thing that those people bring to your career is the feedback and the ideas and the things to work on. That's why they're so good.
Right.
Not because they pat you on the back and say good job all the time, even though they do, because they're positive reinforcement driven people.
Right.
So they'll say that's really good, work on this. So it's not just because they affirm you all the time, it's because they care enough about your success and your animal success that they'll point out the things that you need to work on, and they'll do it in a constructive, supportive way. And that's why you get nervous.
Yeah. But you get so excited to hear that information. I remember, having that ability to just kind of hash it out with Steve and kind of go, yeah, no, I hear what you're saying on that. Maybe I'll try it this way or do it this way, or how do you feel about this? And that's what makes it so great. And I see it in his teams. I see it wherever those teams go, whichever zoo or facility that they're doing shows in, their positive view on just making sure that everybody is moving in the right direction with lots of positive reinforcement and guidance. It's just great. And I try and do that myself. It's hard, but you try and replicate that as best you can.
We can only do our best.
That's very true. In closing, Chad, because I have absolutely no idea how long we've been chatting for, and time has flown by like you cannot believe. Any advice for any up and coming trainers, whether they're bird trainers, seeing as though you've been working with seals, other mammals, any trainers, any advice for them?
I think the biggest thing you can do as a trainer, and I have to remind myself about this all the time too, kind of harks back to what we just talked about. It's being open to feedback and learning, because the technology that we use in our industry is developing year in, year out. We're training behaviors that we could have only ever dreamed of, and it's moving at such a pace that the best thing you can do is be open to learning and feedback. And And that would be my biggest tip, and surround yourself with the people who give you that feedback. So I moved to Adelaide Zoo to go into the free flight program here, but it was with a trainer I very much respect called Nicholas Bishop, who's at the time was manager of nature theatre programs, and he's now our animal behaviour and creative programs manager across the whole zoo. And the reason I liked working with him is because he's very supportive, but he's also a very, very good trainer of people. And when you want to excel in your career and go places, the best thing you can do is find yourself a workplace or a mentor who will set you up with that feedback, and be open to it. Be prepared to change and develop. And particularly don't take it personally, because at the end of the day, we are there to work with our animals, and we're there to make our animals' lives better. And so the minute you've got somebody saying, oh, maybe give this a try, or maybe next time you could work on this, listen, because, and as something you have to remind yourself at all times to do. But I remember it was one of the biggest lessons from my early career was listening to a talk from Steve where he pointed out that really good trainers accept responsibility for the animal's undesirable behavior as well as their desirable behavior. Because really, as a trainer, if you're changing the environment to create the good or the desirable, you're having that same effect at times for the undesirable. And you can't claim one without claiming the other. But that's very empowering, because it means that you then have the ability to change it as soon as you own responsibility for it.
I love it.
And so with that, it means that you can look at your environment, and if you've got good mentors around you giving you tips and feedback and learning, you're opening yourself up to say, I'm not perfect, I need to learn. But it also helps you as a trainer, because it makes it much easier to go, I'm fully responsible for every aspect of this animal's behavior, because you want to make it better. So I think that would be my biggest tip to any trainers. Be humble in your training, and remember what you're there for. Yeah,
that's a really good advice. I love it. Couldn't have said it better myself. And so now that we've got to the end, I'm sure if anybody has any questions for Chad, he'd probably be more than happy to answer any questions. So if you do have any questions, you can send them to animal.talk201@gmail.com. And let us know what you think. Any questions, any advice, any ideas, pop an email.
Always happy as well to, as Ryne said, happy to answer. And if you're interested as well in animal content and following along with the journey here at Zoo South Australia and what we're working on, I am an avid user of my Instagram, which is at Chad's Zoo Life. So shoot us a follow as well, because I always try and post videos of my sessions where I can, and it's a great opportunity for me to get feedback from people I've never met. So shoot a follow too, and if you see something in a session there and you want to give some feedback, shoot it through too. Appreciate it.
I like it. Awesome. Thanks so much, Chad. Really great chatting to you. It's been a very long-awaited conversation that I wanted to have with you. So this is great. I'm really excited.
Thanks so much for having me on, Ryne. I appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks for listening, everyone. And remember, animals are our passion. Bye-bye, everybody.
See you later. But I did.
You read my mind, Chad, because I was just about to ask you that.
Oh, you were going there. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry. Shall I let you ask the question?
No, you're good. Go ahead. I'm so glad. You know what? I'll just go grab a cup of coffee while you.
See this, it just flows. It's great.
It's good.